with the GRC, or it's a whole new topic. Uh, have a better understanding of how this, why do we need a process control. So let's start then. Are you able to see my screen?
Yeah, I can see.
Yeah, we can see.
Okay. So actually, why do we need a process control? Before that, we should understand the risk when we are catering with the different products. Uh, so why do we need to mitigate the risks that are there? First, we need to identify what are actually the risks. So since you are into the access control, so you know what risks are actually, because you might have worked on the segregation of duties and all. That's just the part of the security one. And let's see. So the today's agenda will be like, what is process control and why is it important, and how can GRC process control help, and finally, if all things go right, then we can see how to use the GRC process control. Okay. So since you are already aware about the access control, so the hierarchies we have in the, like, there is a corporate, and they have some different sub-org units, which we call as the org units, organizations. So it could be like within an organization, let's say we have what to say, we have Tata uh, as a, as a corporate. So it has multiple sub-organizations, like it could be Tata Steel, it could be Tata Consultancy Services, like that. And in that, it can have multiple sub-organizations. Like it could have, a finance, or it could have a sales department, it could have operations, marketing, production, material, and all. So in those, what happens, it's very when you are in a multi organization, a company, then what happens that you need to obey the regulations in particular, where your company, let's say it's in Europe region, so you must be adhering to some of the regulations which are there. For example, we have GDPR regulations, right? So we need to protect the data. For that, we need to actually continuously monitor our systems to see if there are any risks associated to specific regulations, and what these regulations actually demand. Let's say, for example, if you are in the Americas region, we have SOX compliance. So we have SOX, like it asks for the financial reporting for each and every financial years. So we provide each and every document related to that. So with the process control, it's actually very easy to identify if there are any risks associated to your particular process or a sub process. A process, nothing but just you know for example, if you are into the sales and distribution, so creating a sales order is a process. So you need to figure out that if, for example, if you are creating a sales order with the right amount of quantity, is it getting approved by, just how the segregation of duties work. So up after the creation of sales order, you can actually figure out if the creation of sales order is, it's approved by different user. So like that, we create a different sub processes, and there are different processes which should adhere to the different compliances or regulations that are there. Okay. So let's say we take a specific example of procure to pay. So what are the different risks that are associated with it? Okay, the first thing that comes here in the procure to pay is the segregation of duties. For example, when the purchase requisition is created, then it goes to the approval. Then once it is approved, then based on the purchase requisition, the order is created. Okay. And if, for example, if the person who created the purchase requisition or the person who approves the purchase requisition, if they are same, then it's actually a violation. So that's the one risk which introduces the segregation of duties should be there, which means simply that the approver and the uh, current owner or user, they needs to be different. Okay, then let's say after the purchase order is created, the user sends the quotation analysis. So in that, let's say if the what could be the possible risk associated when the quotation analysis is being sent. So it could be a supplier or a vendor, particular user, he can favor a specific supplier or a vendor. So with that, what could actually happen, that the further process, it can happen, there could be a delay, or there could be little bribery going on. So that's one risk associated to it. So this is how you can actually check if the proper vendor analysis is done or not. And once this is done, the vendor invoice is generated. Okay, this is just a process. So it actually uh, you know uh, it actually tells how many risks are associated with a particular process, the procure to pay process. So when this particular there are multiple risks, so how does process control comes into the picture? So here what happens, let's say if there are multiple risks associated to a particular process, so as a process control owner, there is the actual backbone of the process control is the continuous monitoring. Okay, so in the continuous monitoring, the jobs are scheduled. We create a different rules which actually scans the background tables which are in, for example, in the procure to pay, and we'll be uh, actually monitoring each and every process or a particular sub process, which will ensure that nothing is going, if there is anything going on, if there is any risk associated which is being triggered, then they should be able to remediate it. For example, if the purchase order and the purchase requisition, if the approver is and creator is same, then this is a risk. And the person who as a process control, it should be whosoever is the control owner, he should be able to actually mitigate this risk, identify and remediate this particular risk by actually let's say, for example, by uh, placing a different user in the approval hierarchy of the purchase requisition, like that. So this is how the process control, the main backbone of the process control comes into picture, the monitoring part. And the second part in which the process control comes into picture is your actually the documentation part. The documentation of each and every risk which is there, or each and every financial reporting which is happening, it is uh, which is required by different regulations in the different areas of the world, of the regions. So the process control actually deliver all those things at just one click, or with the help of reportings. So this is one part. And okay, so how these are the risks which are associated for each, and I mean at each and every step of procure to pay, that's just we discussed. Okay, so if they, let's say, if in the inventory risk, so this is the part of procure to pay. And the first part is, we can call it as a procure to pay, we can call it as a process. And the different the tiles which you can see, we can call it as a sub process. And the uh, within sub process, we can have different sub processes as well. For example, incorrect purchase acquisitions, approval by same person, we can define a control for each and every risk that we see. Let's say, for example, I can have a control which can actually cater to particular risk, Whenever that risk is, if we are able to uh, predict that risk, or if we are able to, if that risk is occurring, then that control will take care of the risk. It will actually, we can have monitoring jobs which will daily or periodically, they will notify to the particular owner of that control, and he will actually take the action, further actions, how they can be the how they can prevent that risk from occurring. Okay,
Gaurav, I'm
so this,
stopping here.
yeah.
So here we got it, the point that GRC system will, you know no, it will check for the control issue. Okay, but how
Mhm.
this will communicate it to the control owner?
They will
How?
be see, when a particular, for example, there is, if I say that the incorrect purchase requisition has been made, so we'll run a monitoring background monitoring job, which will actually check whether the incorrect purchase requisitions has been made or not. And if there are, what it will do, it will generate a issue, it will create a issue and directly report it to the control owner. Okay, then we have multiple background jobs which will actually, with the workflows, which will directly send the notification via email that your you have new work items. What I mean, this is how, whatever the customization that has been done. But with the control owner, they will be notified whether if you have any new issue in your system or like that. Does this answer your question?
Okay, okay. But what about if something which is need to be done in a kind of uh, through persons or manual?
Yes, after this, once the notification is being sent, after that, the particular control owner, he will log into the system and he will review whatever the issue is, and then he will see what further actions can be taken. Okay, let's say if a particular data entry needs to be corrected, or if something needs to be added or deleted, something like that, then this particular thing, it is called the remediation process. This happens after the issue is created. Issue is nothing but the identifying if there are any risks associated to a particular process. After that, everything needs to be done manually.
Okay. Yeah, sounds my question. Thanks.
Okay. So now, how do we define the process controls defense system? So we have generally the three lines. So we call it as a three lines of defense. So the first line of defense is directly like operational management has the ownership, responsibility, and accountability for directly assessing and controlling and mitigating the risks. For example, if I am a CEO or CFO of a particular organization, then if I'm directly assessing each and every risk which are happening, which are needs to be mitigated, or if I'm directly assessing the controls, then this is known as the first line of defense. Okay, then we have the second line of defense, what we call it as, like if they have a particular team, okay, which will that generally happens in most of the companies, because I've not seen any CEO or CFO directly assessing. I mean, the first line of defense in any company, but the second line of defense, they have a particular team in their own company, which will directly assess each and every control and monitor all the issues, and they will prepare a report and they will report directly to the operational management. Okay, this is the second line of defense. Now, the third line of defense is that they have a particular third party which will actually perform all the analysis, and they will make sure that nothing will go wrong as in your the risk based approach. Like for example, if there are any risk, they make sure that nothing goes wrong. Okay, then they will be solely responsible for whatever the if any risk which has been occurring, if there are any like they might have some contract or something, like we have with the third parties, if they have any, you know they actually takes care of the product, the process control, and they report each and everything happens to directly to the higher operational management. Fine. So these are the three lines of defenses. But the generally one which works is the second line of defenses. Now, how the main core functionality of the process control. So, like we have the process control basically works on the risk part. Okay, so we have the risks which are associated to a particular processes. Once the risks are identified, then we plan and scope for each and every risk, whether how they needs to be monitored. Like for example, if there is one risk which needs to be monitored daily, if let's say for example if there are any users who have not changed their passwords like that. So this needs to be monitored, I don't know, weekly or daily or monthly. So after that, once their plan and their scope is finalized, then we document a particular control for that. So once documentation is complete, for example, if this needs to be what could be the operational frequency, and is it a predictive, is it a preventive, what kind of control is this? So like that, we document that control. Once the control is documented properly, then we perform certain uh, evaluation, design evaluation is done, whether the particular control which you have documented, is it actually going to mitigate the risk or not? So once this is done, then the uh, design assessments are done, and after that we check whether the controls, is it effective to mitigate the risk or not. Okay, so this is the third step, and once this is done, and if there are any deficiencies, then the particular process is followed, whether to create an issue. Deficiency is not just whether the issue is raised, like if the risk is occurring or not. That's just the one word for the deficiency. Okay, so once it is done, then we identify whether the risk, if there are any deficiencies, have they corrected it or not. Then we generate, we once the assessment is done, then we particular report on all the controls which are there. Once the report is generated, we particularly then the actually organizations, they perform the internal audits before the external audit happens. It generally happens with the internal controls, and then again the same cycle repeats. Okay, so this is actually the main functionality, and the main backbone of the particular this process control is the monitoring, which actually monitors each and every, it could be SAP system, it could be non-SAP system as well. So the process control actually monitors each and every system, to each and every process or a sub process in your organization, and it makes sure that the particular process or a sub process is, I mean, it is actually adhering to all the policies or regulations that are there in the area. Okay, so how to use the process control, that will be seeing in the if all goes well, then we'll be seeing further in the next sessions.
Gaurav, just a quick
So
question over here. Uh,
yeah.
like we have the standard risk delivered by SAP in GRC access control. Uh, like that way, do we have any such risk already pre-delivered by SAP in process control as well?
Yes, we have standard risks which were delivered only majorly in the finance part.
Mhm.
But since there are multiple companies who implement their own finance logic, but with the standard parts, we have SAP has delivered particular around I think 10 to 12 risks related to financial, but uh, majorly companies, they go ahead and analyze their own risk for the custom part they have uh, you know
Mhm.
implemented in their organizations.
So does the decision lies with
But
company
yes,
whether to utilize those risks in their install implementation or not? or it's like an existing we can
Yes.
use and we cannot use?
No, you can. It's totally dependable. I mean, it depends on organization to organization whether they want to use them or not. But it's a very good practice too, because most of the companies they use them and they build their own risks. They actually identifies all the risks, and once that is done, they build the risk after the analyzing all the aspects.
So how do you relate the risk and control in process control?
See, if let's say for example you are working on a particular process, okay. Now if you see that there is a risk associated to it, for example if you provide some change debug access in the production, right?
Hmm.
So there is a risk, right?
Right.
It's a risk, like it could change anything. So this is a risk, and now you need to mitigate, you need to check, you need to identify it, like whether how many users are there, who have the change debug access.
Mm.
For that, you document a control based on that risk. Now the control is designed to check whether if any user in the production system in a particular system, if they have a change debug access, right? So the control is actually designed based on the risk, one part, and once that is designed, then the testing is performed on that particular risk. It could be manual, it could be automated based on the scenarios. Like for example, for the particular change debug access, it could be automated because we have different tables, and with that tables we can actually identify whether the change debug has been provided or not, and if they have if any user is provided the change debug access, then once the system identifies whether, let's say, two users have the change debug access, so they will generate a deficiency or issue. They will create the issues will be created automatically, and whosoever is the control owner who are actually monitoring over the part of this security risk, they will be notified via email or basically via email. And once they notified, then they log into their system and identifies whether how many users have been uh, provided with this particular risk. And once this happens, then the remediation process gets started. Either we ask for a particular deadline, or we remove those access from the system, like that.
All right, thanks.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anything else? Because that'll be all from my side.
Gaurav, so can you please explain about the master data in a few lines?
Okay, see, master data, just like what I said, first the identification of the risk is done. Okay, like for example, for a process, there could be multiple risks. So once the risks are identified, based on that, different controls are, you know, sub processes or a particular process. Let's say, for example, we have a process called procure to pay. In that, the inventory risk management or different sub processes will be there, and with each sub process there could be risk associated. So we'll be defining a particular, we'll be document each and every controls. So these all parts, whether it is the documentation of sub process, the documentation of control, and the how the mapping of a particular regulation to a control or the risk to a control, once these all done, the combines to be as the master data part.
Okay, what about the hierarchies? It's org hierarchy and process hierarchy.
Yeah, see, the hierarchy works like it as the first, the main part comes as if you see the organization hierarchy, we have two hierarchies mainly in this process control. One is the organization hierarchy, and the one is the business process hierarchy. The organization hierarchy is the local copy, and the business process hierarchy is the central copy. The organization hierarchy comes like as the main corporate, and then after that organization, and in that organization we have sub processes, and then in that sub process we have the controls. So this is the main hierarchy of the organizations. And in the central hierarchy we have like the process, main process, and then we have central sub processes, and then we have central controls. Then we use this hierarchy in the organization hierarchy. We can't actually create any process hierarchy in the organization. We actually use whatever we have created in the central hierarchy.
Okay. What about regulations, regulation and risk and controls hierarchy?
There is no hierarchy in the regulations. We have, let's say, for example, we have a regulation called SOX. Then it could have multiple regulation requirements. So, for example, there is SOX main regulation. So SOX 303, it identifies it as that the all the financial reporting has to be done at the financial year end. Okay. So this is one requirement. So there could be multiple requirements. So there is no hierarchy in the regulation. Once, let's say, for example, if your particular process, it falls under the SOX compliance, then let's say, for example, if it is financial, then it is most probably under the SOX compliance. So we map those particular controls to the SOX regulation.
Okay. So where the control ID or control ID is mapped actually technically in whether.
Yeah, technically you can say.
So the
Okay.
control is
Okay, you were asking where they are mapped.
yes,
I didn't get your question.
whether it is control is mapped to processes or organization.
Control is mapped to the sub process actually. Sub process is mapped to a local process or directly to the organization.
Okay.
Any further questions?
Nothing from my end at least. I think I'm done.
Yeah. Nothing from my side.